You guys will never know what the phrase was, and that's so sad.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the developing landscape of scholarly communications in law. I already don't know how to say it.
We're just trying to figure out if you all love scholarly communications or if you hate comics.
Right. I thought maybe if I dressed like Roger today, you'd think that this is the comics
why not
one.
both?
So this is relatively informal. We've talked beforehand and wanted to gauge the vibe of the people here because we'd like to talk about questions. I think scholarly communications in law is pretty new, which is why we're excited to talk about it. But we'll probably go through some topics. But if anybody has questions or things of concern, I think we're up for just taking those questions throughout, right?
Yeah.
Comments, hot takes, just remember we are live and recorded.
Okay.
Okay.
If we're doing a lot of
Yeah, that'd be good.
Okay.
Much like scholarly communications, we're making changes on the fly to
Right.
adapt to the situation with which we are faced.
So we'll start with, who's talking to you here. How about we do this where we talk about how we each got into ScholComm and give your little bios this way. So John, you're first.
I gotta go last.
Okay, oh yes, that's right. I'll go first because you two have to go together. So my name is Ben Carlson. I'm currently the Associate Director for Scholarly Data and Innovation at this school, PennCarey Law School. I've been here for about a year. I got into scholarly communications by getting a job that I didn't feel qualified for at Villanova about over 10 years now. Back in 2012, I became the Emerging Technologies Librarian at Villanova. I've always been tech aware and interested in trying to find ways to automate things, and a job that had that as a required skill was posted at Villanova, and it involved working on websites and working on a new scholarly repository at Villanova. So I learned to use digital commons. I learned a lot about Excel formulas and how to get some more out of that platform. How to post things in batches, and got a better sense for how the technology behind getting scholarship online works. What it looks like to analyze the crazy download numbers we see on digital commons and other platforms. And so it's just grown from there. I think I was also a director of IT at UConn. I didn't do as much ScholComm work there, but again, I saw a lot about how the back end of technology and the internet is really fueling the kind of work we're trying to do when we're getting our faculty and journals and other kind of scholarly work that comes out of our schools out there. So I'm very happy to be here talking to everybody today.
Oh, I guess that's me because
You're next.
Yeah, that's why it says that. But hi, I'm Christine George. I am, I think, your token non-tech person who's on the panel today. Technology and I are not, we're not the best of friends. But I got into ScholComm basically when I was a faculty services librarian, and things were starting to break out about citation metrics and all of that. And my boss was like, "Oh, you're interested in this? You want to do it? Here you go." So that's when I was at the University at Buffalo. And so then I started working with things there and, kind of digging into citation metrics. And that's when I kind of started also realizing the importance of building up relationships with different ones. Because again, not a tech person, made friends with tech people who understood that kind of a thing. And we were able to work together with that. And then a position opened up at Cardozo where they were looking specifically for somebody who was doing scholarly services, and there was a repository that they were looking to launch and all of that, and it seemed like the perfect next step to take. So I went there. With that, I worked on our repository, LARC, and started building up the different aspects of it there. Was a little bit involved in the Hein author profile drama with US News and all of that stuff, so working kind of with that thing. But again, the other thing that I was learning a lot at Cardozo was about the relationships, because ScholComm doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's kind of, you know, all the different, like how you can help other people, how they can help you, and like sort of building up that program. And then more recently in January, I wound up at NYU because they didn't have anything kind of ScholComm there, and they were looking to really build up that program. So that's what I'm working on now. With that, turn it over to John.
So I was an AV and Access Services librarian at St. Thomas in Miami, Florida for 6 years. I did no ScholComm stuff other than the closest I did was kind of get the faculty publication list together for the ABA visit, as one does when they don't keep track of that all the time. I left that, went to law school, then I practiced law in Syracuse for a couple of years.
Oh, I just wanted to cheer Syracuse.
Oh. and then Christine left Buffalo to go to Cardozo, and they needed somebody to do ScholComm work, and our director decided they were going to start a repository. They wanted somebody to kind of get even more in depth into this stuff than Christine did, and knowing that there weren't like a lot of people doing this, they wanted to hire somebody who was willing to learn it. And I like nothing more than a job I can go into and make up as I go along. So I left law practice, came back to academia, and spent the last 6 years learning everything I possibly can about scholarly communication and repositories and citations and why citation counts don't say what people think they do.
Go ahead and say it. What's the big question?
Big question?
What is a download?
What is a download?
What even is a download?
We're getting right into what is a download?
Well,
No. Sorry. This is what happens. We talked about that. Like, put us all in the room and we just start talking, and you know, ScholComm just happens.
Well, I can start us off on a basic topic that is a little bit difficult to answer, but it's really just defining scholarly communications. I think when I came into this position, it was clear that that was now what the field was called, but I feel like previously in law, there wasn't a lot of definition around it. So I'm interested to know from all of us, like how we define scholarly communications as far as what you're doing and what other people at the libraries are doing to facilitate this. Like, what does it mean to each of you?
Start out.
So-
Sure. For me, it is for just about anything that has to do with scholarship outside of the basic research process, kind of comes through my office or can come through my office. I mean, whatever anybody wants, whether it's, you know, I have professors who send me their authors agreements to make sure that they're allowed to put their stuff in the repository. I've done some data services stuff for the pedagogy committee. My day-to-day is I administer our SSRN research paper series and our repository and collect faculty scholarship. But I mean, basically, if somebody comes to me with a question that's even like remotely related to scholarship, I'll see what I can do to help them. But I can get away with that because that's like kind of, I've been assigned that corner and kind of left to my own devices. There's like, as long as the repository keeps running and as long as faculty are happy when they ask me for things, I'm pretty much free to do whatever looks interesting. And so it could be like literally anything.
I think that's right. It's kind of, I mean, to what they used to say in my undergrad about what the school colors are, whatever you want it to be, basically with that. But I mean, like, that is ScholComm, because I think it definitely has a component where it's dealing with different things with scholarship, but like, what does that actually look like? Sometimes it's cyber stalking your faculty on Twitter to make sure, like, to be like, oh, you're at this conference, oh, you have this paper, and following up to like get that information with it. You know, sometimes it's looking at author agreements, sometimes it's, you know, just kind of trying to compile the works, trying to preserve those works, promote them, all of that stuff. Like, that's one of the things that's most exciting about this field, is that we haven't really fully defined what it is yet. It sort of transcends a lot of different boundaries. The tricky thing with that, and we were talking about this before, is that so like you kind of want to try to carve out your own area, right? Because ScholComm goes into public services, technical services, all of that. But at the same time, as you're trying to like push out and define what your area is, you're also fighting back everybody else who is like, oh wait, maybe this is, and you're like, no, kind of outside of the boundaries. So it's like offense and defense of is that accurate? Is that, I don't know. I already regret dabbling into the sports analogy. And as soon as it was out of my mouth, I was like, oh, mistake.
Unforced error.
What is it? What?
Call it an unforced error.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with that. I mean, scope creep is a big concern because it's a kind of an amorphous thing. We're, broadly, we're trying to amplify faculty scholarship and kind of increase impact, but I've just said a lot of words that don't themselves have great definitions. A lot of ScholComm is figuring out what the institution wants, if they are able to articulate that, and then trying to move towards that goal. But in a lot of cases, it's just doing the best you can. Like you know certain things, you know you can get stuff online. Like certain papers, if we have the rights to, we can put them online. If we don't have the rights to them, we can at least link to the best version out there and create a kind of a home base for our faculty so that people can discover what they're doing. And I think ScholComm is a collaborative effort. We're finding that out as we're launching a lot of initiatives as a group to try and cooperate to find ways. I'm looking to find ways to provide tools to places that cannot afford to hire a full-time ScholComm librarian, which is a great thing to have. But even if you've got certain resource limitations, you can still do a lot of the pieces of this that will help get your faculty, in front of as many eyes as possible.
Like the magicians from last night. You don't exactly know how it happened, but you want the law school faculty and administration to be like, ooh, at the end of it, because the 4 coins appear on the one hand. Anybody have any comments on what we just said, or should we keep working through our Google Doc of different topics?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you mind?
Using a mic.
No. Focus on mine.
Right.
I forgot about the mic already.
So Christine, when you jumped into sports analogies, I'm going to take you back to the place before that.
Oh,
where you
thank
were
God.
comfortable. You talked a little bit about the defining the edges and figuring out kind of where you're pushing and where you have to pull back. And Ben, you were talking about if you don't actually have a scholarly communications person, but I guarantee you that the dean for research or the dean themselves has heard about scholarly communications and wants that. If you were in the position of trying to define at varying levels of complexity, what's the most basic part of scholarly communications that could be tried out, and then kind of how do you grow it from there and define those kind of circles? Does that make sense?
Understood.
Actually, this ties into what you were, the
Okay.
very basic list.
Yeah, I mean, it's making a list. It is making a list that you control of faculty publications. We have, every institution I've worked has had faculty publications living in multiple places, usually on the internet, on a repository, on SSRN. Compile all of that stuff into one place. That's what Grace, our scholarly communications librarian here, and I've been working on as our main goal, is a central data source of truth that has as much information as possible about what our faculty are putting out into the world. So, and really getting that data together. We're using a fancier platform, Airtable, to collect it, which has ways of piping that data out to sources, but you don't need that. You need an Excel sheet at the very least, or a Google Doc that somebody is updating, that you can easily sift through to find all of your faculty's publications from certain years. It actually ends up helping with things like ABA data collection of publications. We're hoping to make a data source that's useful for the kind of impact stuff and figuring out how to get everything posted everywhere we can, but also being able to generate reports for communications, for administration when they need to know how productive faculty are. Having a list that is very easy to start. It takes time, obviously, to fill it out, and you have to know where to look to get everything. It's usually digging through a lot of CVs to pull all that data. But for me, that is the one place every school should start. You don't need to have specialized, knowledge or people to do it.
I would say too, expanding on that, because 100% going off of that list is vital. That's going to be basic. But then like the next thing, and this sounds so shallow, but like it's not, you got to make it pretty, right? Like however that list is sent out. So it has to look consistent with it. And like a part of that fun challenge is when you go through the CVs and then you look up the information, you're like, that article's not called that anymore. Why couldn't you update what your article is actually called? So like different things, making sure there's consistency with that.
Or that article never came out.
Oh, that's the best one.
too.
They list it as a publication that
Like,
never
that's
doesn't
not-
even exist.
That's not a thing. And then also looking at the scholarly profile, so like where this information is being pushed out on. Because I know when people have asked me like how to start, like one of the most effective ways that I saw with it is like even just looking at SSRN, and you can go through and have like, I can't even tell you how many different variations I've seen of different school names, like when going in to this, and that's something basic too. So like making sure that's there. If you have the subscription with them, whatever, like you have the branding on that, you put the faculty member's photo on there, you make sure it's the correct, that's the other fun thing, like make sure their title is correct. In that and like that kind of a thing, and looking for consistency among that. And that's one of the first things that, again, it seems like so silly, so shallow or whatever with it. But when you go and you show, like that is something concrete that you can show too, that is like, oh, that looks nice. Or if you really want to make it fun, when you show that, you show it next to somebody from your like rival institution. I mean, I know we're all friends here, but show it from the rival institution, and when you see like how ugly theirs looks versus like how pretty, like, oh, that's great. So like, I mean, like that's the kind of thing, because that's part of what this is, which like, because you have to do the concrete work, right? Like if you don't have the list of publications and everything, it's very hard to do that. But there also needs to be a bit of razzle dazzle to get people on board with it and be like, oh yeah, like I want that, like I want that to happen. They don't know how it happens with it. But an interesting thing when we were talking about that is also the challenge too that you face with ScholComm with that is, so like not all reps are created equal. Not everybody knows kind of all the same things. So like it might be like, if you don't know to ask for that to happen, it's a little bit harder to work with that. But I think like that's, as you're starting to branch out more, like always, like it's always with the substantive stuff, but like there's also the presentation aspect, or at least the consistency aspect of that. And actually, we're looking for someone at NYU to fill that position. I would be remiss if I did not say that we have a job opening, and that is part of what that person's job will be, in addition to like other different things. But the Schol Pro librarian, so that could be you.
But yes, seriously, once you have a list, you can, that's like the start of everything. Once you have a list, if somebody decides, oh, hey, we'd like to know what citation counts are. Well, now you've got a known list of all the faculty publications, and you can, go to the different sources to get that, whether it's Google Scholar and Publisher Parish, or if it's Hein Online, or SSRN, though I don't think their citation count's very good, so I wouldn't do that. But once you've got a list, that's your starting point.
So 2 questions from the online chat. How have you solved the pain of keeping these lists up to date?
I don't know if there's a solution to that problem. It's the problem we have, to be honest, is that we do not know in a lot of cases when our faculty publish things. There are, of course, ways to set up alerts that tell you things, that can notify you when things have been posted to various sources. You can set up alerts in Westlaw. SSRN technically has RSS feeds, but they do not work because SSRN does not maintain everything as much as we would like. So it is probably one of the biggest technological challenges, and honestly, it involves a lot of manual work. We scrape through CVs when they come in, or annual reports from faculty, and we find new things that they never told us about. What that means is you have to build that relationship, which is something we're still trying to do. Building a relationship with faculty and hopefully through the administration who can encourage faculty to reach out to you, to know that Scholarly Communications and the library is a partner to the faculty that want to help increase their impact. And the best way to do that is to inform them when you've posted new things to SSRN, when new things are published, when you've been on a podcast, when, things that some of them tell communications, but they don't tell us. So more consistency with that is our biggest strategy.
So we, on that note, we made friends with people in the communications department, and we've got, we set up an internal emailing list that I'm on, our director is on, I think one of the reference librarians, and everybody in the communications department, and somebody in the dean's office. And basically, if we find any new publication or new thing that we think everybody else needs to know about, just throw it in an email. Hey, this professor just published this book. And then everybody does with it what they want to. So I'll get stuff from communications, I'll send them stuff. I also do faculty, the usual faculty alerts in Westlaw, and I've actually cut out the middleman on that. And so I get it, but I also have it automatically. I just have Westlaw send it to that list so everybody gets it. So they don't have to wait for me to look at it and say, oh, hey, there's 3 new things. They can all do it in their time. And then they also set up a shared directory on Box. When I say they, communications did, for CVs, and they just, whenever they get new CVs from the faculty, they just dump in that box. So I've actually started checking it when I do my monthly repository updates, and when I update all my faculty publication lists, I'll just check it. I'll just check and see if there's a new CV. And sometimes there's a new CV, and I get an article or something from that. And then everybody has to turn them in every year. So then there's that one time a year in June usually that I go through and do all the new ones and find the 10 people that never tell us anything have new articles out. But it's like a lot of little things. But the biggest thing, if you can make friends with somebody in whether it's the communications office or the dean's office that is getting that information and collecting it anyway, and just getting it right from them, because it's easier to do that than to train the faculty to send their stuff off to one more person. It's kind of like less work for everybody. And also, if you offer to share what you get, then I think that probably goes a long way to establishing those connections.
Make friends with faculty support.
Definitely. At Cardozo, the dean created the editorial board. So when I was there, I sat on it, the library director sat on it. There was the associate dean for faculty development was on that, the communications team was on that, and different people kind of would cycle in and out. But there was a shared inbox that we all had access to, and there was a weekly email that went out to faculty, be like, hey, tell us what's going on. So it did take a while, but faculty got pretty good with responding because they just have to hit reply to that email with it of reporting things. But a lot of that is just, it's sharing information. So even with that, not everybody reported everything. So sometimes you're talking, you hear things. So it's basically really, trying to foster friendships, if you will, or at least alliances with different people to share information. And I mean, a part of that is too, like John pointed out, you have to share what it is that you know as well. And sometimes the reference librarians happen to know if somebody's working on an article because there are a lot of requests coming in with it. I knew a faculty member that I did a lot of work for. I knew exactly when she was in book rewrites because my inbox blew up. So, it's kind of knowing that information. So again, it's the connections. That is a huge part of this because, bless their hearts, even though this is all to benefit the faculty, sometimes they will not go out of their way to tell you the different things. So, it's one of those. And then it's also some of the things too where I've done some outreach to students with their notes, putting their stuff on the repository and talking to them about now you're a scholar and all of this stuff. And the things I did tell them, I was so in the future, when you publish things, it's really helpful if you tell your librarians that, just maybe, they want to promote your stuff. They want to do this, tell the library. They always, want to do that. So it's, it's a give and a take kind of a thing.
I want to reinforce something Christine just said, which is talking about all they had to do was hit reply. You got to make it easy. You have to really focus on making it easy. Whether or not you think faculty are actually busy, they are going to tell you they are too busy to do a lot of, updating you all the time. So you need to make sure that, you test it, you do user experience on what is it like to submit new information about scholarship to the library. If it involves any more than a couple of clicks or having to find a link to something, it's going to be a problem. So make sure it's top of mind and something that they can easily get to whenever they think of it.
Also, maybe if you send out that email, learn from my mistake, which was put the faculty in the BCC, because they get real mad with the reply all. Although sometimes I think it's incentive. They see that, but they do not like the reply all, even though it was not me who did the reply all, it was one of their colleagues who should have known better. I was still the one that heard about it. You only make that mistake once.
Another question in the chat is, anyone else using Elements for storing data on faculty communication?
I'm not familiar with that.
I haven't heard. Please do tell more.
Anybody in the room?
Wait, hold on, is it an Elements rep? Get that information first. Sorry, wait, there was a hand.
Yeah, there was a
Yeah.
hand.
So yeah, we use My Elements, the entire university does, and our faculty have it mediated, so they don't necessarily do it anymore. I do it for them, and it actually works out a little bit better. I don't hear their complaints, and it is clunky. It is not the easiest thing to use, but it is one way to kind of develop that list. And you can theoretically run reports. I don't have access to run those reports. I have to have somebody from the university do that. But we're still kind of working through that component. But
Is it like a faculty reporting system, like a digital measure?
it is like you would put, it's really meant for the scientific community.
Right. It's always a
So the law people are like, what the heck is this?
Yeah.
And they essentially refuse to use it for their annual reports, but that's one feature that it could be used for, which would make so much sense, right? Like here's it's just all in one place, but they've decided it's too clunky to do that, so they no longer do that. But it is one way to make sure that at least their citations are somewhat accurate and can be put on their website. And My Elements actually provides a feed into our faculty profiles.
Oh, that's cool.
So it's kind of automated in that way.
That's interesting, the common themes that come up with that you probably reacted yourself and saw us reacting to. The fact that like for law, which a lot of other disciplines don't realize, like the librarians do all of this. Law faculty do not do that. We kind of put in the work for them. And every single thing is designed for the sciences. My God, if I can convince one person who like has the programming knowledge to like, not necessarily give up this law librarian life, but like design the product for us to, you will not make money off of it because we're just not a big enough discipline. But for the love of also, like we will write songs in your honor. We will erect statues in libraries. It will be all sorts of amazing if you could just design the one thing that like has law in mind first. And it was like, sciences? What? Never heard of her. So like that's what we need.
One thing that Elements discussion made me think of is there are faculty reporting systems that a lot of universities are using, like digital measures. I know a lot of schools use. If you know of those things, and you can tap into them at all, or get somebody who's in charge of that system to send you regular reports. That goes back to the relationship building that Christine was talking about. There are people who are getting, and John was talking about this too, there are people who are getting that data in the school generally, and often you don't know about it until you ask a lot of questions, until you find everybody who's touching faculty information and say, what are you getting? Is there any way you can send it to me? And is there anything I can send to you? Like, we're trying to build those two-way relationships to make, really beneficial partnerships all across the law school and centralize the way information is flowing, because it's amazing how many silos there are.
mean, as a complete aside, we've started doing that with non-scholarship stuff. Like we've now got another folder and box that just where all the syllabi live, because there's like the dean's office and like 2 different committees need access to the syllabi, and it kind of came out of. There's actually no real reason for the law library to touch this, except that it came out of my relationship with the faculty member who was the chair of the pedagogy committee, and now is actually our new vice chair for research. So I work with him all the time for that stuff. But it's just like, all these people need this stuff. Nobody can get the faculty members to send it to them. So, all right, I'll coordinate this thing in Box. We set up an email address where they just send their syllabus, once a semester, and then I just pull it and throw it in the directories, and then everybody, every office that needs access to it has access to it, and they just get in there and see what we have, and that's just that's the sort of thing that keeps us in contact now with more people in different offices that we wouldn't have contact with just because, me and my supervisor said, oh yeah, sure, we'll take care of that for you.
And I mean, that's the big thing too with relationship building, is sometimes starting off with the equivalent of bringing freshly baked cookies. Also, maybe bring freshly baked cookies, but with the repository, you can leverage that with different departments. Because I remember at Cardozo, the communications department, the magazine that they had, they didn't have an index, so somebody would have to look through it every time when they needed to see something like that. That was one of the first things we digitized and put into the repository. And it was mind-blowing to them when we were like, oh yeah, no, we made sure it was OCR searchable, all of that. You just have to type the person's name in this little search box and it'll go through the entire run of the magazine and you can see anytime their name appeared up. So there's that, or different things. We found out that the dean's office wound up using the graduation programs and stuff, because they were like, oh, that's listings of all of the faculty for the entire run except the 1 year. That was my white whale. But I do not know why nobody saved from the 35th graduation, why nobody saved that program. And to this day, the most annoying thing ever. I do not believe I was able to find that before I left. But anyway, that kind of a thing where listen to see what is it that they need, and it might not be strictly ScholComm, but it might be something within your ability to provide or to make a connection to help the thing. And you'd be surprised how willing people are to share information and stuff with you later, after you came in and kind of made their lives a little bit easier in one way, shape, or form. So yes, a little manipulative, but still, I'd want to help them anyway, obviously. I'm a librarian. I live to help, ish. Mostly.
Any more questions or?
Catherine?
I can just be really loud.
Also, good job on making sure the questions are so spread out that
Yeah.
it's a run.
Thank you, Sarah.
All the other one.
So you keep talking about relationships and the importance of relationships in this, and mostly in the context of relationships with faculty. What do you advise in terms of, especially for schools that are newer to this in the last few years, in terms of relationships of the people who are working on this with other people nationally who are working on this?
Get involved. This is, I've benefited so much over the past year from being connected to Christine and John and all the other people. We started the Law Repositories Caucus, I think has been the big catalyst for me, but there's also the Scholarly Communications Forum on AALL. That's been a great start. Christine hosted an amazing online conference last year about repositories and a lot of the issues facing it. There's so many amazing minds in there that reaching out and finding out who's doing this, we've already brought a lot of people together, but we're looking for anybody who's working on this to really start this conversation, figure out what the issues facing everybody are and how we can address them.
We're a friendly bunch too. I don't know sorry for you people who arrived on time or late, but the early people got to see Ben and John actually exchanging information, and it just came up in conversation too. Ben's working on something with another person who's pretty big with this, Joe from Berkeley, and they're working on something technical, but whatever. It's something that can help.
Right.
John, That's what people say. They're like, yeah, you can tell exactly where your knowledge falls off with it because you get a lot more vague about things. You're very specific, and then all of a sudden it's like the thing that does the thing. But like, I mean, that's part of the thing. I'm saying it too many times now. But the community that we're kind of building, and it did spring out of the Law Repositories Caucus because a lot of us kind of wound up sort of doing the same work because it's, you see now coming out that there are a lot of jobs that actually have ScholComm in it. For the rest of us, like kind of when we were starting and everything, it was shoehorned in, right? Like you were reference, you were technical services, all of that stuff, it was coming in. And I think that was one of the things that I found most helpful is like the sense of community. So like if you are new to this or anything with that, like join the Law Repositories Caucus, and if you're in AALL. If you're not, reach out to one of us and we'll export information to you with that. But we are being recorded now, aren't we? You're supposed to stop me before I say things like that.
I haven't seen anything bad yet.
Yeah.
You guys are gonna wait to see how far out I go. But like check to see, because within the discussion threads, there are a lot of things that have been coming up with this because we're all kind of trying to deal with these issues, and none of it is easy and straightforward or any of that, because again, it's kind of, I use the Apollo 13, which I feel a lot more solid talking about that than sports, analogy of when like you're trying to fit like the square peg into the round, or whichever way it was or whatever, and then you kind of just like throw a bunch of things out on the table and it's like, okay, we need to make this fit into this using only this. And that's kind of what, like, you know, it's sort of winging a prayer with a lot of the different things, and you try it, you see what works, and not every institution is the same because everybody's jobs are different, people are different, the institutions are absolutely different. So it's, you know, trying to figure it out, and I do appreciate that everybody seems to be, or at least I don't know, to me at least, everybody has been friendly and welcoming and like willing to like collaborate and try to make it work. So it's a really good I mean, maybe that's why I got into ScholComm. It's I don't care about scholarship. It's the friendships I made along the way.
Seriously, it is a good list, and people are very quick to answer questions if you have them. And if another place that's available if you're not a AALL member is ALA has a ScholComm list that's open to everyone. There's a little bit less kind of back and forth and discussion on that list, but there are a lot of announcements of like free webinars and stuff just for like background info.
Actually,
that can be helpful.
It's like, I mean, I'm gonna be bad now and say this. So an example of how the friendship thing helps out and everything, that we all talk to each other. There was something that came out with B-Press about sunsetting a certain thing. And
B-Press isn't listening.
it's, when we're off, there's so many other things to say. But anyway, but the thing is, we all talk to each other about it. With it, and I wound up talking to a rep about doing the thing, and like I dropped this information. He was like, "How do you know that?" I was like, "I talk to people. I know exactly like what So it's one of those things that it's helpful with information sharing, because sometimes vendors want to be a little less than clear about things, and you know, like obviously there's certain things that like institution to institution you can't necessarily share, but like when a vendor's trying to, you know, pull one over on you, it's kind of helpful to have a group of people to be like, hey, did you get this email? Did you take this, like, did you get a meeting about this? And it's, what are you guys doing about this? You know, kind of obviously not organizing or anything like that, you know, makes AALL freak out. But like, it's just helpful to share that information to go in, like, you know, to be able to have as much information as possible before you go in with different things is usually helpful. And that is definitely something the two of you should have stopped me from saying. With
That's
you
fine.
knew exactly where I was going.
You stopped right at the at the line.
That's good.
I think one of you said something at the beginning, and I think it might have been Don, about citation counts not being all they're cracked up to be, or some sources doing a better job than others. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. Which part of it? I mean, both are true.
Both. I'd love to hear about both.
Okay. So the thing about, I'll start with the different sources give different numbers. That is a common problem you find when you start getting into doing any kind of citation counts or bibliometrics or any of that stuff. It's the numbers you get are based on the journals or other sources that a particular source uses in their counts, and also the quality of their data. I mean, so a lot of like when a lot of this is done by law professors for a while, though librarians are publishing more about it now. But a lot of the law professors do it, they use Westlaw because it's got all the law reviews in it, or at least all law reviews back to the 90s. And so that's the source they use, even though it's not really meant for that. You can kind of, you can make it work. And something like Hind Online has pretty much all those same journals too. So they're counting, the places where law professors are publishing. The earlier, more professional full-featured tools like Web of Science, they only carry about 150 law journals. What they will tell you is, they pick the top journals because that's what they do. They pick the best journals, but except that half of the journals they pick are things that nobody reads that are published by big publishers. Just esoteric little law journals that happen to be published by Elsevier, are not as read as, journals from the top 50 law schools. They just aren't. But they don't even have all the top 50 law schools journals. They have 40 of them. So there's a huge universe of stuff outside of what Web of Science has that isn't being counted if you get citation counts from Web of Science. And the same thing is true if you do it in Scopus. It's a different subset of stuff. I mean, that's just the nature of the thing. It's these numbers, there's no absolute one true citation count number. I mean, maybe there is in theory, but in practicality it doesn't exist because you'd have to collect every single source, and then the data would have to be accurate, which a lot of times it's not. Those services, they're all automated to some extent, and things get missed. Citations are incorrect, they're formatted incorrectly, and the scanning doesn't pick it up. Or it wasn't proofread properly, and the volume number is wrong on the citation, so the scanner doesn't pick it up. Sometimes a journal uses a weird citation format, like Westlaw doesn't pick up that it's a citation. So it's just, there's a lot of moving parts, and you kind of have to know if you're using a source for citation counts, what the strengths and weaknesses are of that tool. You need to know what's in there, but you need to know what's not in there to get context. So if you're using law-specific stuff, all of your generalist law professor stuff, it's probably going to capture most of what they publish and most of where they're cited. But as soon as you get people doing interdisciplinary stuff, it may or may not be captured depending on what the discipline is. If it's economics, maybe Hind Online will have some of those journals that publish it and cite it. Maybe they won't. Maybe Westlaw will have it. Maybe not. If it's medicine, yeah, probably not. You're going to have to go to Web of Science to get those.
But that's going off of an archaic system too, which is frustrating, right? It's saying that the most important way to calculate that impact is if you were cited in a journal article with it. I mean, that's why journal rankings themselves are kind of ridiculous too, right? Because articles aren't necessarily associated with the journal with which they're published anymore. They can be indexed individually through Google Scholar, so you're finding it because they're on repositories with that, versus you going to the library and picking up, I'm not going to name any school names here, I don't want to make any enemies, but picking up that particular law review and be like, this is number one, everything in here must be golden, which is just not true at all with that. But I mean, because if you care about, citation metrics, which falls under the umbrella of impact, right? But what is impact? What matters? I mean, quite frankly, for my standard, it's being a question on Jeopardy. That's when I know I have hit maximum impact and all of that stuff. But or what's the other one? I had Macau as a citation in the Blue Book. I was like, ooh, that's another one. You get used as an example in that. But I mean, it's because it's one of those questions, is it, and that's where downloads come in too. So what is a download? Is it because so many people have read your paper and all of that stuff? Is it that? Is it because you're featured on a major podcast and people, millions of people get to hear you and your ideas and all of that? It's a question of, which I don't know that we ever actually had an opportunity to consider, as a discipline, what is it that we care about? Because we have been dragged along with the sciences, with it, because the sciences figured out a way, of course they did, to quantify something that really is not quantifiable, with it. And then, I mean, humanities has kind of the same issues that we do, sometimes some of the other social sciences and everything with it, where we're like, we don't fit here. Like, this isn't a good way for us to figure out. I mean, don't even get me started on the H index. But, like, you know, it's one of those things, but we've never had the opportunity as a discipline to just like sit and be like, okay, so what matters to us? How can we possibly measure that? You know, there's just not that space to do it because the train sort of already left the station. Funding is tied into all of this. Like, you know, you have to report back to your institution with all of this information. So it's kind of frustrating because we all know that the system, I mean, I think, right? It's an open secret. Like, we all know that the system is terrible. Like, it's not, there's no good way to calculate scholarly impact if that is news to you. I am so sorry for breaking that so bluntly. But, you know, it's one of the things that's really, really frustrating because I feel like it's kind of a constant, like, us trying to play catch up or trying to provide context around numbers, like, right, like telling the story of impact to go along with the numbers just to make them seem, you know, better or palatable, really.
Yeah, I mean, we went through a lot of these discussions with the Hein drama a few years ago, and it was just, once somebody said, here, we're gonna use this, and this is the universe of citations that are gonna matter for a ranking system. And immediately the cracks were evident that it's not, okay, interdisciplinary, at Penn, you know, fully 1/3 of our faculty works are in peer-reviewed journals, law and non-law, that are not getting picked up, as John said, in the same citation counts as other, so you would have to combine them, and I don't trust aggregating those numbers, even if we could find all the sources. Also, book chapters in books are like, faculty still publish these a lot, and these are not getting counted almost at all in any of these counts because they're just not in the article universe. So, I mean, going back to Christine talking about how bad the system is, it's just not effective at measuring anything close to what impact should be. If we're talking about impact being like something like reach, how is this reaching people? How is it affecting their, you know, their ability to understand the law or impacting, you know, maybe ideally it's getting cited in a Supreme Court case that it actually affects the outcome. Those are qualitative measures that we should probably be looking into ways, I think, to be focusing on qualitative impact, focusing on real world impact if it's there, or trying to show individual stories of this article came out, and as a result, these pieces came out. I mean, I'm not sure how to do that yet, but getting caught up in the numbers has been really frustrating, and I would rather just stop. But it's hard to. That's kind of the ecosystem we're in.
I mean, the fundamental problem is what you're trying to capture with citations is use, but citation is only one use of an article. Like, that doesn't count all the times that, you know, it was cited by undergrads in an undergrad paper, or grad students in a paper that wasn't published, or all the times it was used by a law journal article is used by a practitioner to give them the background on a type of case that they, you know, have never done before. And that's not theoretical. I did that in practice. Partners would bring me articles and just be like, hey, you know, explain this to me. I mean, those, you know, or even just members of the general public who read something because they're interested because law affects everybody. Like that, none of that stuff gets counted. And when you focus on the citations, those uses, I mean, they're deemed unimportant by focusing on the citation numbers.
Ideally, law schools would be deciding what impact they want to have and communicating with libraries about how to make this happen. But that's different for every school. So I think trying to have that conversation as early and often as possible is a good strategy.
The real problem is when your provost is out of STEM.
I mean, there's no fighting that.
Just saying, sometimes the deans are just asking for what they're asking for because that's what the provost wants.
Well, I mean, and the other thing is too, is acknowledging, so we talked about relationship building and all of that, and some of that is too, to make sure librarians are involved in the conversation with it. So like the Hein incident, which I'm sure they love that we refer to it as such, because it's not just their fault, right? The Bob Morse incident. Bob made a bad, but anyway, I'm gonna get in so much trouble for this presentation. But I mean, part of that was, so librarians came in because we knew about the Hind profiles, we knew how to clean up the data, like we kind of do that. So that's one of those instances where like we were able to shine, and because conversations had already started, like we had the opportunity to. So I think a part of it is constantly reminding people that we are here, we are, you know, we are in this space. We're also talking to other law schools, so we know sometimes, like, because right, information trickles in from a lot of different ways. So sometimes the dean's office has information first about like things that are going to impact everybody. Sometimes it comes through the libraries and we're able to raise the alarm with that. So it's one of those of, you know, having the open lines of communication too, and also knowing all of the relevant parties to pull into that meeting where it's like, oh no, what are we going to do about this? How can we fix this problem? Because I think a lot of the times there are just different silos, like I think Ben, you had mentioned in the law school, and we really can be in a position to help with it, but people just don't know that we're working on that.
So we're down to 10 minutes.
Yeah,
Do we have
one
any
thing I
other
wanted
questions
to
or
do-
any more from the online?
Someone wants to know what other school uses Elements.
Oh yeah, what's,
Oh, yeah.
Oh, sorry, University of New Hampshire.
University of New Hampshire uses Elements. Is that Elements AI? Is that?
It's from Simpletics.
Okay.
It's one of their products.
I'll need to look it up. One thing I did want to mention, Catherine had asked earlier about you know, schools that are new to it and how to build those relationships. One thing, John put together a really good list of resources for, you know, to get started. So and this QR code links directly to it in their repository at Buffalo. So just a good primer, just a few really good resources to get caught up on kind of some of the good scholarship on, you know, these issues. Highly recommend that.
Almost all of it is available free online. I think there's 2 books that weren't.
Forgot the QR codes up there. I was like, why is everybody suddenly taking pictures? What happened that I don't know
All of a sudden the
about?
phones are like, no, you've done it. You said too much, and they're putting it on Twitter.
I was like, oh no.
Are you just doing that to inflate your own statistics?
It's all about the downloads.
No, I've already got tenure. I'm good.
So we want to talk about things we're excited about, future stuff, projects we're working on, like that we're allowed to talk about, or
I can talk about it.
anything, yeah.
Next, we've got another question that somebody
Yeah,
has
I mean,
answered.
We want to make sure we're answering
Any
questions.
questions? I mean, I guess we'll welcome heckles, this hot takes.
Clapbacks, whatever you got.
Yeah, it's fine. That's gonna right back.
Yeah, Lori.
I can just talk loudly too.
Should we repeat? We'll repeat what you said.
There you go.
Okay.
Thank you. So we were talking about scholarly communications, but I was wondering if you had any good strategies for capturing student-generated work. It's kind of another measure of the law school's output.
The question is about capturing student-generated work in addition, like as a part of ScholComm.
Yeah. We're trying to do it more. Traditionally, when I got here, we had been putting on the repository prize-winning papers. One thing that we realized is that we've obviously also got the full history of our journals, which have a lot of student work in them. So it's already there, but it's not separated out at all. So we're trying to find ways to kind of relist some of that stuff just as a student collection of all the comments and notes that have come out of our law reviews. It's in the works. It's not something we've started on yet. But we're trying to figure out, it's tough with student work for us to figure out what the boundary is of something that should go on the repository. I think the work is certainly on par with a lot of really interesting faculty work that's coming out. But what's the line? Is it something that was just written for a class? Who needs to approve it as quality scholarship? Because we can't read through it all. So that's what maybe stops us from over-inclusion. But we're figuring out those guidelines.
We saw a good opportunity when I was at Cardozo so student work, like if it was a published note or different things with that, but also like there'd be announcements going out about students from this particular clinic sent this letter out, and the PDF of the letter was put on the law school website, so we started working with communications to get it uploaded onto the IR, like kind of also with the thing, like the IR is sort of like, no one wants to say forever for the thing, but like the website could change and the link could break or whatever, and plus then you can also track the downloads and different things with that. So we had started kind of expanding a little bit with student work with that, and I had also started targeting the journals, particularly the ones like with the notes and trying to get that, and also because I believed, I was like, if we start early, we can get them, so like, telling them about like how you can manage your digital scholarly footprint and different things, and also different considerations too about like the citation gap and different things with that, like being cognizant of that in the hopes I was like, maybe there's a future law professor among you, and whoever your future librarian is, I hope they thank me. But, or at least don't raise their fist to the sky and be like, why didn't you teach them this? But, I think that there's a lot of potential there, but like Ben said, like it's trying to figure out where the line is with the two, and it depends too on how many faculty you're helping with it.
I got nothing.
I was gonna say there's like another year.
The only thing we have is the stuff that was published in the journals. We haven't done any other student work, I think, just because of all those kind of problems, and just that's not what our scope is. The best thing I've done was when we did our historical journals, I was able to get most of the authors of the unsigned notes and actually give them full credit.
Oh, that's nice.
Because they were like, they had a lot of case comments and stuff that were just initialed, and I went through and pulled them figured out who they were out of the editor's list, and so like their full names are on the repository. That's like literally the only thing I've done.
To tell them that?
I did
You
not.
should have teamed up with the, whatchamacallit, like alumni affairs or the like fundraising people, institutional advancement, and like sent letters and then included a little envelope to the library and be like,
I was still new. I didn't know them yet. I didn't know the alumni office
see,
yet.
this is why you have to make friends, because you bring that kind of thing to the alumni office and be like, maybe you get yourself a $25 donation because like they're all excited about like that kind of thing. Give them a nice little frameable gift certificate with certificate of acknowledgement or whatever with you have X number of downloads.
Now, the only thing I did was I emailed the link to our dean's father's student notes
Oh,
when they
that's
went up.
nice.
So I got a nice note back from her, but that was it.
That's good.
I'd say also tapping into student groups, student events, if they're recording their events, doing interviews, there's a lot of stuff that sometimes we're not, you don't even know about until you kind of make those connections. And if they are publishing any scholarship out of their symposia, conferences, that's not being captured in the journals, that's another great outlet for that.
We do have one more question in the chat. Do you have any recommendations for streamlining the processes of posting faculty scholarship to different places, such as SSRN, school websites, etc., or setting up submission processes between professors and librarians?
SSRN is tough because it's old and it is a web form that is, as far as I can tell, not automatable. And a lot of that work has to be done manually. And it depends. Some schools have a lot more faculty work on it. We do a lot of SSRN support. Grace has been doing a lot of work trying to come up with an intake form that the faculty could use to submit a lot of the metadata that we need to post to SSRN. I think a lot of it is that, and then figuring out maybe if you have a data source, like if you're maintaining a central list, and you can put it in a format for batch upload to Digital Commons, that's another way to go.
I mean, one of the things is helpful, and that's where like the ScholComm thing comes in, like if you have it like kind of a centralized thing. So if the person who's managing the repository is also like keyed in with whoever's doing SSRN, whoever's managing the overall scholarship list, like different things with that. So like if you can, like there's no easy way on like your end, but like for the faculty at least, you're more likely to get the information, going back to what Ben had said, if you make it as easy as possible for them to send it to the one and then, try to work through the processes, but like they just don't talk to you. That was the one positive thing about who remembers the whole hullabaloo with B-Press and SSRN doing the joint uploads and then the combining of downloads, which, that was a bloodbath. But that would have been kind of neat if you had like a single upload thing for SSRN and Digital Commons, but that just didn't wind up shaking out.
Sometimes you think you want these platforms to talk to each other, and then you realize you don't, because SSRN's metadata and Digital Commons metadata is not compatible at all.
I will say one thing about submission. I take SSRN submissions via email, but honestly, we've gone for as frictionless as possible for our faculty, which means more work for me, but before I got there, before we started the repository, our library director and our old dean, they set it up as an opt-out process, and they just basically told the faculty, we're getting this, we're going to get all of your articles, and if we are allowed to put them up there, we're gonna put up there unless you tell us not to. And every time we hire new faculty, I send them a long email, this is all the stuff I do, this is your chance to opt out of being included in the repository, no one's opted out. But what that means is, when I get those things from Westlaw or communications or whatever comes across my desk, I track it all in a database, and then like once a month, I go out to the journal websites and I download them myself. And then I put them on the repository. Like everything's in a database, so if I've done the journal before and I know the policy and I can put it up, I put it up. If I can find the policy on the website, I put it up. If not, then I start emailing journals for permission. But like they don't do anything except answer my questions if I occasionally email them and say, hey, you still have your author agreement? But it's like, there's no real submission other unless they think about it and email me. I do it all.
So we are at time. So I think we're gonna wrap it up now. We have to run over to the auditorium where we started for the closing plenary. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thanks to John and Christine for coming in. Please, I didn't put our emails up, but reach out to us if you have questions. We're all happy to find new people in the fold and tell you what we know. Thanks, everybody.